going on, everybody? And thank you so much for tuning in the channel. So it's been a little bit since I've done a video, but I wanted to take the opportunity to chat with good buddy Jeramy Goble. Jeremy, how you doing today?
Hey, not too bad at all. Good afternoon. Thanks for having me and letting me chat with you.
Absolutely. I guess it is the afternoon now. Dude, I'm losing like so much track of like time and days. Like, what even is it anymore?
It's still like March 23rd, 2020 in my head, you know?
Yeah, or at least maybe even the 13th. Like I've been, it's weird. Like I feel like I've been so isolated at my home for, a year and 6 months now, which I haven't been. It's just I'm always in this office.
Right.
Or at least in some part of my home for the past year and a half, even though I'm allowed to go out in my car when I need to. But it's just so odd. Like, it's just like time, like, just where does it go? Like, I wake up, like, I know the morning routine, but like, as soon as like my daughter is at my in-laws house, like there's like a hole of like 7 hours that it's just work and whatever else. And I look up and it's 4 o'clock and I'm like, well, crap, they're on their way home now.
Yeah. You had like this many things to do and you got 2 of them done.
Yeah. It's like, I've got to cut grass at some point. We've just had like all this rain, which everybody in the Northeast is getting now, which I don't know if you've seen like video and pictures of New Jersey and New York right now. It's insane how much rain they're
underwater,
getting.
Yeah.
But we had that for the a couple of days ago, and we didn't get quite as much as they're getting. That looks horrible, and I hope everybody up there is being safe. But yeah, so now it's time to cut grass because we've been getting rain for the week, and I'm like, do I have time to do it today before a holiday weekend and we're not going to be here? Whatever. On top of work and top of all this other stuff. It's
right.
Nuts. So yeah, I'm hoping there's this, some kind of like vortex where there's like gives me a couple more hours to do something.
Yeah, kind of like a time warp fold so you can get more time.
Yeah, some kind of like multiverse thing where like there's like expanded and maybe there's another me that comes through and can do it for me because I don't want to do it.
Hey, self. Go knock out the yard for me, right?
Yeah, I'm waiting. I'm still waiting on the one that can like read all the books that are on my TBR, but I don't think that's ever gonna happen.
You're right. Yeah.
Oh, geez. So just first of all, I just want to kind of ask what I ask everybody. So tell me about yourself. What kind of struck the writing bug in you, and then kind of why did you decide to write fantasy?
Sure. So let's see. I guess the very first inkling to write was in college, which was I started 20 years ago, fall of 2000, so 21 years ago. Whew. Man. So yeah, I guess it was in college. I took a creative writing class. I've always been interested in reading. I've always loved books. I've always loved literature, the history of literature, And so I just wanted to take a creative writing class as one of my electives, I think it was. And I just loved it. I've always loved reading, but I loved that really helped me fall in love with writing. And it was in that class that I wrote a short story that influenced and encouraged me and inspired me to write my very first book, which was the first of a space opera, sci-fi fantasy kind of story that I published in 2013. So that's how I got to start writing.
I gotcha. Yeah, and you've actually entered that one in specific, correct?
Yes, I did. Yeah, so I had previously entered that. So I'm really passionate about it being a space opera, sci-fi fantasy, and I was real timid during SPFBO 2 or 3, I can't remember, where I wanted to enter that. That was my first book and only book at that time. And I was like, asking Mark and others, hey, can I enter this? And they said, well, if it's fantasy or if it's got fantasy elements or if it doesn't, it'll be judged appropriately and it'll make it so far or won't. And I was like, yeah, whatever, totally cool with that. So I entered it. It got cut first round, no big deal. Got to meet a lot of folks, talk with Mark Lawrence, obviously, which was awesome, and got got inserted into the community, which has been amazing, whether it was other writers, readers, bloggers, amazing community. So yeah, I entered that book in specific, but when that new contest started up, I message to Howie. I was like, hey, this has been entered in SPFBO. This is me typing. This has been entered in SPFBO previously. Can books that were previously entered in SPFBO be entered? And they were like, yeah, sure. It'll be judged accordingly, just like SPFBO. If it's sci-fi or whatever, I got a cat saying hi back to you.
So it's always an added bonus.
That's right. Furry friends. House is covered in them. But anyway, so yeah, I said, can we re-enter books that have been in SPFBO? And they're like, yeah, sure, if it's appropriate. So yeah, I tossed it in the ring, and we'll see how that goes.
I gotcha.
But but back to your question about fantasy, what started me? So I guess just to kind of circle back, my first book was inspired by that short story I wrote in college. But I don't want to say my passion was always rooted in fantasy, but I've always wanted to focus on fantasy. So once I got that space opera trilogy out of my system, if you will, is when I turned to fantasy, because that's what I would say keeps my creative gears rolling most of the time.
I gotcha.
So
what were some of the books that really stuck with you growing up, and are there any that you just reread consistently?
I would say the first half dozen or so of the Wheel of Time books, those really got me. Those really kind of sank their teeth into me from a fairly early age. Just the world building and the characters and the minutia of a secondary world. Along with Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit first. Reading that as a kid, read Lord of the Rings in my teens. So between, Lord of the Rings and Wheel of Time, I just fell into this perpetual love for secondary worlds and world building, and what makes characters tick, or what might make potential characters tick in something that I might be writing in secondary worlds.
I gotcha. Yeah. Have you checked out the trailer that dropped today for Willow Time? What do you think?
I thought it looked sharp. There's been some blowback about character casting choices, but I'm excited. I'm excited about what they're going to do with it. I'm excited about how they're being reported to treat the work and faithfulness to it. So I'm really excited, and it looked great.
Yeah. It's one of those things where I know we always try to figure out what's going to be the next Game of Thrones, what's going to be that one that everybody's talking about. Can't wait for this, the next episode. Everybody, because we don't. And I was talking to Zamil Akhtar about this a couple of weeks ago. We don't have those water cooler talk shows anymore.
Right.
We really don't, because everything's streaming now. There's not you don't have to pay extra. You don't have to have a premium HBO service like what we did with Game of Thrones. Everybody's I know what I'm doing on Sunday. Is Wheel of Time going to be that show for everybody? And I watched the trailer, and I think it will. I don't know, because I said that about The Witcher too, and while a lot of people enjoyed it and talked about it, it didn't have a lot of staying power, I guess. People were excited about season 2, but I just don't feel like everybody really hit it, because if it was, you could just watch the whole series in one go. Now I don't know if that's how they're releasing Willow Time or not, but I feel like it could be that next big thing.
That's a good point. Game of Thrones, I think it had the fantasy elements and the epic fantasy elements that grabbed onto the epic fantasy fans, but it had a lot of that deep, complex characterization that grabbed on to people who weren't necessarily fantasy fans, that were just
or readers.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. People that it grabbed onto people who were just straight up drama fans or plot fans, or just a good plot. And and the show had, of course the books do to a higher degree, even more than the shows, but the shows had that real dramatic, plot driven, character driven, plot and character driven, I would say, aspect to it. So it grabbed onto people who were not necessarily fantasy fans. Yeah. As far as your question or your the notion of this being a water cooler topic, I think that the books and I think that the books definitely would lend to that. I guess it just depends on how it's executed from a TV show standpoint.
Yeah, because it's hard to have water cooler talk about books because it's hard to find people like in your direct vicinity that read voraciously, which I think is the reason the book community is so awesome. Is that there's not many people around me that I talk to on a daily basis like that actually read, except for my bloggers and everybody on Twitter, and authors, and so I think that's why like a show could be that. But at the same time, with the pandemic and stuff, there's not a lot of people that are really in office gathering around and talking about stuff like that. But yeah, it's weird. But yeah, I watched, like I said, I watched the trailer and it looks really good. I'm really excited for it. And then of course, you've got the new Lord of the Rings series that'll be coming out down the road. So I'm interested to see how that one's going to turn out as well. But yeah, it's just so funny because like, yeah, Willow Time, Lord of the Rings. I'm like, oh yeah, those are both about to have shows coming out.
yeah. And it's funny. I think we're kind of in a golden age of fantasy, epic fantasy, not just books, but also TV. I think especially because of the pandemic, folks are, they have more time. And even if they're not necessarily epic fantasy fans, they're more willing to check it out. Hey, this looks epic, let's check it out. So I think that, right now is a good time for that kind of stuff. So hopefully it will allow us to have water cooler talk, even if it's on.
Even if it's on the Zoom call.
Right. Yeah.
So you told me about Willow Time, you told me about Lord of the Rings. So would you say that Tolkien and Jordan were like your writing influences as well, or do you have others that really influenced your writing style, kind of how you wanted to perceive yourself as a writer, or are there other ones that that you've read in the past that you go, oh gosh, man, like it'd be so awesome if I could write like that?
It's funny. That's a really awesome question. So I would say before I really got involved in the epic fantasy community, readers, writers, bloggers, everybody, before I really got kind of entrenched and involved and started interacting with a bunch of folks, I would say those folks were a lot, Tolkien and Jordan, those were kind of my predominant influences. People tease posthumously, I guess they tease Tolkien about being wordy and, taking a page to describe a tree or whatever. But I love that verbosity. I love the minutia, like I mentioned earlier, all the detail, possibly to a fault. So I would say that's what influenced me early. I liked getting a little wordy, a little verbose, describing the minutia of something to really set the scene, really try to evoke certain senses for the reader and things like that. But I would say in the past, 5 or 6 years, as I've been interacting with readers and reading books by people that I've been able to interact with, for example, T.L. Greylock's Song of the Ash Tree series, that Norse-inspired epic fantasy trilogy of hers. Really love her writing. Josiah's Babel Tower series, obviously, I love those. And I haven't come across anybody that has a mastery of prose and writing like he does. And his books are a treat. They're just a straight up treat to read. So I think those folks, those types of folks have worked their way in and influenced me for the better and hopefully made my writing better. So yeah, I would say I started off writing with a certain group of influences and I've added to them as I've gone along.
I gotcha. Yeah. And I've heard, talk about Jordan as well being a little wordy, about, taking a couple of pages to a chapter to talk about a tavern.
Right.
So, which, there are people that really enjoy that, and there are people that don't. And if you don't, then skip it and go to the next thing.
Sure.
But
skim it, kind of speed up over.
Yeah. It's like you look for the actual sections where people are talking, and then you can kind of get through it. Because if you read, if you feel like you're an avid reader and you've been reading for months or years or whatever, you kind of figure out your reading style. And you can kind of figure out once you get really close with the prose of an author, you can kind of figure out like if it's going to be an info dump section, like where to go to find the next thing. And I'll find myself skimming, those big old paragraphs of just word vomit of, like
the horse's mane was plaited with gold lace. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And if it's an entire 2 or 3 pages about like this bench that was made and how it's engraved, and the carpenter's wife, had a miscarriage 20 years ago. It's fine, it's great, but like it's not really adding to the story, in my opinion. But I'm also one of those like that really takes my reading how I took my video games. Like I wanted to know everything. And so, I've talked to a couple authors about this. I was always the one that wanted to know what was beyond the invisible border. When you're like in, your Skyrim or your Fallout or, Zelda, whatever. If you get to a certain point, you can't go any further. I'm like, what is there? Like, I see stuff. There are trees and mountains.
What's in that town?
Exactly. And so I feel like that's the way I read too. Is like I always want to know what's next. And that's kind of how I approach, when I read about world building, is I'm going to go, okay, we got here, but I know there's a lot more to venture over there, and we're going to find that out. Right. And I know authors get tired of hearing about that. They're like, yes, we're going to explore the world more. It's book 1.
And that brings up a really good point. I think that it's incumbent upon the authors, writers to do such a good job at investing a reader in the characters that they want to know more and won't skim over the minutia of the world building. And it will become more interesting to them if the characters are good. Mm-hmm. So, you know what I mean? If you're invested, like if I'm invested, when I'm reading something, if I'm invested in character Bob over here and his relationship with Susie or whatever, if I'm really invested in them, that might make me more prone to read the info dumps because I want to know how the world's affecting them. So that's a good point.
Yeah. And you brought up the Books of Babel by Bancroft. That's probably one of the first series I've come across where it wasn't the characters that really got me. It was actually the world building. Because the different ringdoms in the tower, just the audacity of the things that people would do. And the fact that he had a beer me go around like that just like sold me instantly. But yeah, it's I came to really enjoy Sinlin's character, and I still do, and Adam and Volita and everybody. But yeah, it was just the interest in the tower itself and how it worked and how all the different ringdoms differed and why they differed, and like how each one had different set of rules and all that stuff. And it's And he had the little info dumps at the beginning of every chapter, from little notes from the different books and so forth that were inspired by it. And I'm like, gosh, I really hope he puts an Everyman's Guide together at some point in time. But that might be one of the only ones where like the world building is really what struck me before the characters did, because you just have Thomas like entering this area. And he's just kind of looking around and taking it all in. And so that gives you, the reader, to take it all in. And then you start really kind of getting in touch with Sinlin's inner workings and so forth, because you're like, oh, he's got to find his wife now.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Spoiler alert.
Yeah. It's interesting as I don't know, as flamboyant as the tower is and the ringdoms are, once that's presented, it like you were saying, once that's presented as crazy and complex as the ringdoms are, it dives deeper into his character, Sam's character, and it's even more tangled and complex. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and actually, I went back and listened to the first three books because the new one's coming out in a couple of months.
Yes.
And super excited. But yeah, it was so interesting just how the character of Senlin, like how he starts out and where he's at now, and like I'm really interested to see how he's going to finish out. But like his character arc is just so it just changes, it just evolves and devolves a little bit, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, but okay, enough about Josiah. I could talk about him all day. But tell me about your writing style. Kind of how have you, I guess, crafted it? How, from your first space opera book in 2013 till now, with Eulogy, how has it changed? Have you found kind of a rhythm, like a daily rhythm that you do now with like word counts, or do you write a chapter a day? What is your tactic?
I would say that I try to knock out 1,000 words a day, and whether they're garbage, or whether I think they're garbage, or whether I'm second guessing myself as I'm writing, I try to knock them out. I try to knock them out regardless. But having said that, if I can't get 1,000 down, if I can't write at all on a given day, if just all hell breaks loose or whatever, and I can't write on any given day, I really don't. I really try hard to consciously never get down on myself, only because I want it to always be a positive thing, a
Mm-hmm.
fun thing, a positive thing. So whether it's me, or if I'm telling other folks, if I'm answering folks for other writers, or whatever, or if I'm answering questions like this for other folks, I would just try to recommend, or I try to recommend and reinforce that they always keep the process fun and enjoyable. And if I were to ever be traditionally published, and if Orbit's breathing down my neck for deadline, that's fine. I get that, contractual deadlines and things like that. But I would still try to always always keep the fun just above the deadline, or the work quota. So yeah, just to circle back, I would say I try to knock out 1,000 words a day. Um, usually come weekend times, I will still work on 1,000 words at least, maybe 2,000 words on a Saturday and or Sunday. But if I will wait until I get that goal, and then circle back and maybe revise, totally just throw something out. But I will usually wait for these little gates. I'll set these little gates and goals for myself. 10,000 words before I go back. 20,000 words before I do serious revisions. I do one other tactic, or one other process or technique for me, is I do like to edit somewhat. And I think this just might be a little bit of OCD on my part. I do like to go back and revise and edit as I go.
Mm.
Most people will say, get the first draft done before you go back and do any revisions. And I totally respect that and totally get it. But I think just the way my brain works, something will eat at me something will keep eating at me from 2 chapters ago, that will keep me, kind of at a roadblock before I can allow myself to move on to that next scene or whatever. So yeah, I would say, just in summary, trying to do 1,000 words a day. I try to set myself some goals or some gates before I go back and do any revising or editing, so that I do keep some of that forward momentum.
Mm-hmm.
And then just plug through, until I finish. One other thing that people usually ask, are you a pantser or a plotter? Every book I've written so far, and I've written 6. Every book I've written so far, I have started with an outline. And that's not because someone said it's the best way, or it's just something that has helped me kind of just keep a general high level picture of where I want to go.
Mm-hmm.
I do plenty of changing and improvising as I go.
I gotcha. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's I feel like you have to have a little bit of both. Like I feel like you got to know where you're going, but at the same time, like you kind of, because a lot of people are like, I never thought my characters would go that direction or they would make that decision. So I'm like, you have to leave it open for that, but you kind of want to know where it's going to end as well, because you could just keep writing and a trilogy turns into 4 or 5, 6 books, 14 books.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, it's always interesting. And I feel like a lot more people outline more than they don't, or they say they don't, and I'm pretty sure they do in some form or fashion. They just don't want to admit it.
You're right. Oh, it just came off the top of my head. Right.
Yeah, I totally just figured that out. Just that's exactly what I was gonna do. That's what they were supposed to do.
Right.
They were supposed to murder everybody when they were actually supposed to save them. That's just what happens. I'm like, this isn't a playthrough of BioShock where you just decide to save all the little girls or you decide to sacrifice them, whatever. Excuse me. So let's talk a little bit about your SPFBO entry, Eulogy for the Dawn. So it's the first book in your Wrathlore series, with let's go ahead and see it, with a gorgeous cover by Felix Ortiz and designed by Sean King. Gosh, it's so pretty. And I feel like I've like seen this cover for a long time, but like seeing it on a book is just another level.
Yeah. You probably have seen it. You probably have seen it for a while. You probably have seen it for a while because I started this and did a cover reveal a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
But my day job at the time, I worked at a hospital at the time, and I had just gotten I work my day job is in IT, and so I just gotten hired as a manager at this hospital of an IT team, and it was wild and crazy. The book was done, but I hadn't had a chance to secure any editing, beta readers. Actually, it wasn't quite done. I would say it was about 3/4 of the way done. So anyway, having been my 6th book, I had no doubt in my mind. I was like, yeah, I'll go ahead and start doing the cover reveal, get ready for a launch in a few months, whatever. But real life said nope, and I got a new job. It went crazy. Some other stuff in my personal life went crazy, and then COVID happened, and just
darn that COVID.
It just destroyed everything. So it was super delayed. So that's probably why you saw the cover for a long time. So yeah, Felix Ortiz and Sean King, art and design. They are
dream team.
They're killer.
They really are.
So yeah, just real quick, I'll show the whole. It's kind of dark in this room right now.
Looks good.
But,
full wrap. Oh, good grief.
So they murdered it, and Ingram Lightning Source, the book printers, they have fairly recently allowed or added the option to have art printed directly onto the book boards. So I had them do that.
It was a very good choice. It was a very good choice.
It's a pretty sharp looking book. Yeah.
If I'm going to read a hardcover, I always take the jacket off, and if I can have the cover on the jacket, actually on the shell itself, sold.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I'm super pleased with it. It looks pretty fancy, and I can't stop giving enough props and thanks to Felix and Sean. They're killer.
Absolutely. So so tell me about the book. What is it about? And then we'll go from there.
Okay. So I would say what the premise for the book came to be because I had written that space opera trilogy. I had written a standalone dark fantasy, and then I started an adventure series accessible to anybody, just a good old fun adventure fantasy series. But I wanted to, for years I've been wanting to get into an epic fantasy series. I wanted to start an epic fantasy series. I had some of the premises that I'll get to in a second stuck in my head, but it was also kind of a love letter to some epic fantasy that I have always loved, a tribute, an homage. So yeah, epic fantasy. And I had just been reading a lot of Michael Sullivan stuff. I had finished one of his series right around the time that I had started it. So I just had epic fantasy on the brain. So the premise, I love tropes. I love some of the good standard classic tropes when they're done well, and I love it when people manipulate them a little bit and tease with them. So the premise for Eulogy for the Dawn is that there is a group of god knights that do the will of the creators, and they've been doing it for eons. This group of knights, and the premise was what were to happen if one day they just stopped hearing from the gods. They stopped getting directives from them. They stopped being able to communicate with them. No directives, no communication. And as part of that break of communication, that lack of communication severed their ability, the knights, their ability to regenerate their power. So not only are they lost for direction from the gods, but they are slowly becoming weaker. And that's the premise.
Yeah, I just like looking at that cover, I'm just like, oh, it's I'm just expecting this massive epic, these giant monsters and stuff.
Man.
And you call it the epic legend of gods, dragons, demons, beasts, and men. So if it's got all that, I mean, it's got to be pretty epic, right?
Yeah, I really wanted to have fun and just go for it. I just want to really have fun, go for it. There are some races, classical, traditional, epic fantasy races in the book. Dwarves, orcs, a little bit. Elves are alluded to. Some of those traditional races come in and out of the story, and they will come in and out of the subsequent books in different ways. They're not the typical Gimlis, and not the typical elves of Rivendell. They're different, but there are also some original races that I wanted to have some fun with. There's a race in the book called the Seavers, and they're kind of a hybrid between beavers and otters. And I wanted to feature them as a seafaring race. We have seafaring races in other books, but I wanted to have a fantasy creature race that was not necessarily waterbound, but their natural environment was the water, fresh water, salt water. So that's a fun race to have that I wanted to have some fun with. So yeah, there's some fantastic elements. There's some traditional fantasy races, some new races. Some different approaches to some of those fantasy races, all centered around this world impacting mystery of where did the gods go.
So sounds like you got like a little bit of Lord of the Rings, a little bit of like Redwall.
Oh yeah.
A little bit of Brian Jacks.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I think it's got some good fun, and overall, as most series should be or are or intend to be, I should say. I'm intending for this one to be, kind of like Star Wars, episode 4. It's the opening, appetizer, introducing you to the world, introducing you to the major conflict, the issue, ease people into it. And by the end of it, we're well into the first course, and hopefully getting people hungry for the second, third course.
I gotcha. So you're planning on doing a trilogy?
Yes, sir. Yeah. The second book is just about done, and I'm not going to put a time frame on that or launch covers prematurely in case there's another COVID, but
unless in case you get another job and then we have another pandemic for a year, 2 years, right. 3 years, 4 years.
Yeah, but it is intended to be a trilogy. Second book is about done and ready for revisions and proofreading and betas and all that. And then the third book should wrap it up.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So Domarin, is that, I guess that's how you pronounce his your main character's name?
I pronounce him Domarin.
Domarin. Okay. Domarin.
Yeah.
What was the inspiration behind his character?
There's a group of God Knights, like I mentioned before, one per race. Excuse me. And he is the God Knight for the race of man, humanity. And he is the last one. There's 5 or 6 of them, but he's the last one that was a member of the original group of God Knights at creation. So he's, I don't want to say he's an anti-hero, but he has been so exposed for eons to the slowly gradual increasing level of cynicism and bitterness and animosity and resentment and suspicion of humanity that it's grown weary, or it's grown on him. So I would say his primary influence is to try and steer humanity back to its potential, especially because he's been around since creation. So, when he's out and about talking with the other God Knights and members of the other races, they're, I don't want to say they're young, because some of the other God Knights are also thousands of years old, but he is, he's eons old. And, he sees the other races with, some of their optimism, some of their naivete. And he's not necessarily jealous of it, but he wishes that his race could get back to being a little bit more positive and constructive for the world. So those are his primary motivations, I would say.
I gotcha. Yeah, it's real interesting. I haven't seen, I've seen these stories of, the White Knight, or the knight that's, for the glory of the gods or whatever. But I haven't actually seen like a God Knight story, so I'm interested to see how it all pans out. And it's just interested to see, this appetizer course. Right. So, but how have you felt your, I guess your introduction to, or I guess this new introduction to SPFBO? Because I know, you had kind of ventured into SPFBO a few years back with your science fiction slash fantasy slash whatever genre you want to call it. You did that. So what's it like now? Like, how are you feeling about Eulogy? I mean, we're getting pretty close to semifinalists, finalizations, and then finalist announcements in the next couple of months. Has it been any different this go around? Have you met some new people, made some new friendships along the way?
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to 2016 or so, I can't remember for sure. I've met so many people who are passionate about stories, what they are, what they can do for people, whether they're readers, writers, bloggers, just people who are passionate about stories and the power of stories. It has been very rewarding, it's been rewarding, period, but it's been rewarding as a reader. It's been rewarding as a writer. It's turned me on to some great books. It's helped me become hopefully a better writer. That's the thing about writing, is that hopefully I'm always becoming better. I don't ever want to be at the top of my game. I always just want to write a better book. If I were to kick the bucket tomorrow, I would hope that somebody were to, if somebody were to be like, let's look at Jeramy's books, hopefully they would say, oh yeah, you could tell that he was improving as he got older, or put more books out. So that's my goal. I just want to always tell a better story. So back to SPFBO specifically. The community is awesome. It's helped bring me into, or it's helped expose me to a community that aren't necessarily always like-minded, but they're but they're passionate about stories and telling stories, and sharing stories and the power of stories. So that's regardless of any placement, of a book in SPFBO, you'll hear everybody talk about that who's entered a book. That's the real, that's the real prize, I guess. As far as being a contestant or an author in the competition, I would say the competition has helped me focus, or helped me maybe get a better definition for myself as to what epic fantasy is, dark fantasy is. It's helped turn me on to some really, just really prime examples of excellence in those types of genres. So yeah, between the community, influence on my writing, and exposing me to great examples of those primary genres, it's a huge thing to be a part of, in numerous ways.
All right, yeah, I always hear a lot of authors say that their next book is their best book. So that's always a good thing to keep in the back of your mind. Is like, this book is really good, but the next book's gonna be great,
Right.
And you just gotta hope that the readers, follow that,
right. Yeah.
Down the line. Have you read anything recently that you'd recommend?
Let's see. The most recent book I read, I believe, was Dirk Ashton's latest Paternus entry. If for anybody that's not aware of his Paternus series, it is an amazing series centered around ancient primordial gods, creators, and their struggles between each other, and how that conflict spills out into the real world. So I would highly recommend that. Dirk's a great guy, and I love his stories.
Yeah, Dirk's awesome. I'm very jealous he's at Dragon Con right now. I told him he needed to swing by Birmingham on his way out.
That's right.
I was like, I can't venture to Atlanta, but if you've got time to go to Birmingham, it's only 2 hours away.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, his series is great. It's one of those that I read the first one and loved it. I still haven't finished the second and third ones, but then I backed his Kickstarter, so I've got all the hardcovers. So I'm like, I have to finish it at some point, right? I mean, I'm doing the whole slipcase and everything. Like I've got to put something into this. But yeah, he's a great guy. I love talking to him, and he's big friends with Michael J. Sullivan, who you mentioned earlier. You were reading some Sullivan when you were writing your last story. So
yeah,
but that's awesome. Yeah, for sure. Well, Jeramy, I really appreciate you coming in and chatting with me today. It's been great getting to know you a little bit more. Definitely looking forward to Eulogy for the Dawn. If the story is anything like that cover, I know we're in for a massive treat. So especially when that shell comes, I'm looking forward to opening that book up. So, but best of luck with that. Best of luck in SPFBO. And best of luck, with your beta reading and everything going in for book 2. Definitely looking forward to that cover reveal. And we'll definitely do this again sometime.
Hey, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate the conversation. And congratulations on your 200,000th view. I saw FFA with that.
Thanks, man.
That. Yeah. So thank you very much. I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely.